So the FORTitude 10K USA Pro Chase Race is a concept with American athletes that come from the local and regional parts of Colorado in this area of the country to run a race against one another in a staggered start format, so handicapped. And so based upon your PR, we'll use a statistical or an algorithm to determine where you should start.
It takes the same concept of a wave start that we've perfected for everybody in the Boulder and the FORTitude and applied it to the pros.
It's a race where men and women compete together and compete against one another.
So we could have 40 or 50 competitors, each with an equal chance of winning.
It creates a very exciting platform at the finish, and this is one of those races where anyone can win.
Hey, good morning and welcome to the 2019 FORTitude Pro Chase Race. We're just a couple of minutes away from the start of this elite field that's going to be taken to the streets on that same course that you all just finished. My name's Alan Culpepper. I'm a two-time United States Olympian. I'm joined by Mr. Frank Shorter, the legend himself. Not only an Olympian, but a two-time Olympic medalist, including the 1972 Olympic gold medal. Frank, I'm glad to be here with you today. Let's set this up.
Oh, this is great. A lot hotter than it was early. I think the athletes out there are going to have to be very, very careful. But this format's in its third year now, and it basically is a handicap race. The slowest predicted runners go out first. The scratch runner, who will be a male runner, starts out. And the theory is based on the what you call logarithm, or it is that if it were to work perfectly, everyone would arrive at the finish line at the same time. But it doesn't. But it comes close. It comes very close.
It does, and this is a unique format. It makes for a different racing dynamic for these athletes. They can't just gauge off of each other the entire race. They really have to focus on their individual pacing while at the same time paying close attention to how they're gaining or losing ground from the other athletes around them. You know, the athletes that we spoke to yesterday at the press conference, they really like this because it's different, because it really it rewards them in a number of different ways. So not only does the top finisher overall and your placing overall, male or female, you get prize money for that. You also get rewarded for running the fastest time, and you're also getting rewarded for running against your respective female versus male. So it's in three different ways they get to be rewarded for a great effort, but it makes for a different dynamic, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
And the runners who have run it before, there are 4 women and 5 men who have run this race before, and they like it, and they have confidence in the system. They have confidence in the handicap system, and there we go.
So those are our first 2 runners. Over the course, we have 41 athletes taking part. It's about a 7-minute 30-second stagger. So over the course of that 7 minutes, we're going to see athletes go off in different waves. And again, it's based on their predicted finish. It's based on times they've run, their personal best, while also factoring in performances over the last 12 months so that we can get a best assessment we can. It's actually a lot of time goes into figuring out the algorithm to ensure that we have the most fair, equitable race possible.
And that was Erica Ruiz and Cassidy Hearns who were the first. This second will be Erin McLaughlin. So we have some are individuals. Erica's going off by herself. So she's the second wave, and they all have predicted times. Erica's predicted time to run is 36:30. But if she exceeds that, and that's where all the updates that we're going to get along the way really help, is that you can tell perhaps trends. People are running better than they thought. That's number 3, launch 3, Alicia Williams and Brittany Hutton.
Brittany is one of those that we're going to be watching. She seems to be coming in really good form. Shared that she's very excited for this race, that she's gonna tear it up today. So we'll see how she fares as this race unfolds. Again, it's just a different dynamic. They're starting behind others while others are chasing them, and it makes for this interesting dilemma of how do I pace myself, especially today. Frank, it is quite warm. I mean, we're talking record heat. And for these athletes to try and run a hard 10K, all-out 10K in 80-plus degree temperatures makes for a different dynamic. That looked to be wave 7 with Carrie Verdon, Elizabeth Weiler, and Taylor Ward.
And again, these waves are based on predicted times. You submit 3 very recent performances, whether it's in the marathon or 5,000 meters or 10,000 meters. And the algorithm takes this into account, and it also takes into account at what altitude you ran these times. And so it'll be very interesting. It's getting more and more refined every year, but as we've said, the athletes really like it. They enjoy it. You talked about perceived effort yesterday, and that's really what it is. You can't slack off. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to take a little rest here. I think it requires a very even effort.
Yeah, one of our former champions of this race who won it back in 2017, Ian Butler, is back again. We'll see him start here in just a couple more minutes. He said it's one of those races where you can never slack off. You can't you can't hold back at all, because it's going to change the dynamic. You have to be pressing the entire time, which it just makes it challenging for these athletes to not be able to settle. When you're in a pack, when you're in a group dynamic, you can feed off the other athletes and at times settle and really relax in. Whereas in this, you really can't let off, because someone's either going to catch you or you're not going to be making up the necessary ground.
And you can't draft. When you come up on someone, you have to go by them. And believe it or not, it's a 7% energy saving if you run off of someone's shoulder. Well, you can't do that here. If you come up to someone on their shoulder, you have to go by them.
Sure, and those that are watching, a lot of you are familiar with how beneficial drafting is in cycling. It's just a known entity. Whereas in running, it's kind of underestimated that you are getting a benefit by running behind people, especially when you're running at the speeds that these athletes are running. We're about halfway through the wave start here. Our first males will be going off. We'll get to some of those individuals as well. That looked to be Jackson Freest and Dylan Stansberry. So our first 2 males now are on the course. This was our 15th wave. They started, almost 5 minutes behind the first females. So they already have 5 minutes to make up. Again, it's an accordion. It's going to take some time to shake out. The idea is that by the time we get to the 6th mile, in theory, they would have all converged, and this is barring that everyone had a fantastic day and ran the perfect race for them. It would all come together and we'd be dealing with a photo finish at the end. As Frank shared, that's not always the case. But you can wake up any morning and have a different day.
But the athletes like it. They really do. They like the idea. And what it shows is the confidence that you can have as an individual athlete. I can do this, and I think I can learn how to do this better than anyone else. And so it really is a confidence thing, too.
That's right.
So 5 of the men and 4 of the women have done this before. And as you can see, it's a precise start. And you have to go right. This isn't like a downhill ski race where you flip that little baton and your time starts. Here, you have to go right away and hit that mat.
And the vast majority of these athletes live and train at some version of altitude. We have some that are coming from Wyoming, but a lot are here right from Colorado, and many right in the Boulder, Fort Collins area. So they're very familiar with racing and training in particular at this elevation.
And the heat is really going to be a factor. It really is. And it's almost 80 degrees, and it's going to get hotter, and there isn't a tremendous amount of shade. There isn't. And I was out running in it yesterday, and it really is noticeable when you hit the shade, but here they're really out, and that asphalt absorbs the heat. So it's a lot hotter on the course, and even hotter than it is, say, in a football stadium where you have a different color down there. It's very hot out there, especially when they have the new asphalt down.
Yeah, the factor of the heat, which is not to get too scientific here, but essentially you need oxygen to go to your working muscles. You also need those red blood cells, which carry the oxygen, to cool your skin. So it gets pulled to the skin to try and bring your temperature down.
Right.
Therefore, less oxygen can go to your working muscles. So that's why, in short, why you basically run slower when it's hotter. There's less red blood cells to move that oxygen.
And everyone's different. I truly believe there's a genetic difference in your ability to adapt to the heat, to adjust to it, and to adapt and actually run. Some people do better when it's hotter. Some do better when it's colder. But this is going to definitely favor the hot weather runners and the people who have acclimated, who have spent at least 2 weeks to adjust, and more than that to try to adapt.
Well, and Frank, we have our leaderboard split, which we already have. The first women have already crossed the mile mark at 6:21 per mile. So they are already a mile ahead of these gentlemen. So this is where it gets interesting, and we'll start to see it unfold. And each mile, that gap will close because these men are, significantly faster over the course of 10K. But already the women are at the mile mark, and we have our last males that are just about to get onto the course.
And once all the runners have passed the mile mark, the algorithm in the program that we have will tell us how close each runner is coming to his or her predicted time in this race. And so there'll be a little bit more, a little bit less, slower, and we can kind of gauge who's having a good day. We'll start to get this idea of who's more on than someone else.
And as you shared, not much shade on this course. There is the mile that a lot of folks just ran, the Titan Mile along Mountain Avenue. That's the most shaded. So that's basically from mile 3 to 4 is the most shade that they're going to find. Otherwise, they're pretty exposed out there. Maybe before we get into the heat of the battle here, Frank, we just want to say a shout out to congratulations to all of you folks that ran today. Glad you're with us. The expo that you're enjoying will be open until 11:30, and you want to definitely stay with us. As soon as the elite race is finished at 10:45, 10:50, right around that time frame, we'll have our Labor Day salute honoring our first responders here in the Fort Collins community, and some skydivers are going to be taken to the skies too. So you're going to definitely want to stick around for that.
So different from a pack race where everyone started at the same time. It really does favor someone who really has a sense of effort, and we keep talking about perceived effort, and you know when you're right on the edge, when you can't go any faster, 1 or 2 seconds faster, and you start going into what's called oxygen debt. You're not getting enough oxygen. And as Alan pointed out, when it's hot, the number of red cells you have going into your lungs also changes. And so that sense of exactly where you are physiologically really comes into play the hotter the race.
Well, and that's Tim Rackers you're seeing there on the board. He was our gentleman that started last. He has a predicted time of just under 30 minutes. And so he got the benefit of starting last, and he's going to see how many individuals he can pick up. He graduated from the University of Tulsa, standout runner while there. He has sub 29-minute 10K on the track speed. He's run 28:41. He works as an engineer, and he started running at age 15. So he's really been out there for many years and has 7 siblings. So I'm sure that toughened him up as a youngster.
I think he said he was the oldest. I think he may be the oldest of 7.
And our goal as this unfolds, ladies and gentlemen, is to really help showcase some of the predicted times, as well as get as many shots of the different athletes as we can. We have the press vehicle out there. We have a Jeep that's out there with a camera on it. So we're trying to move around to get as much footage as we can. It's different than a normal race where we can just have the leaders the entire time. But this makes for a different dynamic for the watching public as well.
But again, we're waiting until the last of the runners goes through that 1 mile point, and we'll get our first readout. And it's really, in a way, the first time for us, too. We're going to see how we can try to interpret this and then see what trends there might be.
And the beauty of the technology nowadays is with the mobile app and with the tracking devices, we can actually see how the trends are unfolding. We get predicted times every single mile. So they may be still in 11th place, but we see that their actually predicted time is that they're going to finish first. So we're going to help showcase some of that while not giving away either too much information as well.
And what dawned on me yesterday at the press conference was, and this was also pointed out by one of the athletes, if this really works in this kind of race, you have to say no GPS for the runners.
That's
because
right.
they can, in an earpiece, they could be told where they are relatively in terms of their effort along the way.
That's right. Well, there you get a nice shot. See a bit of that gap. That's still Tim Rackers there, who's going to be trying to make up that gap. Frank, you have a sense of where they are on the course at this point?
No, I wish I'd started my time when he took off. But my guess is he's got to be pretty close to the mile, and I think we're very close to getting our first readout. And there's a sign. Let's see what that is.
That should be the mile mark.
That should be the mile mark.
That's correct. So those VMS boards, those serve as the mile markers. So we'll get his split here in just momentarily.
Yeah, the ever adaptable people that put on the Boulder and FORTitude, they decided that construction zone signs like that are actually a better use and more portable in their own way than having an overhead sign along the course. And they're running as a group. And already we have some of the men passing, I think, one of the women.
So Frank, there is this interesting dynamic where if you catch someone in front of you, your natural tendency would be to use that individual to work with them to continue to move forward. In this instance, you really can't do that because then they had started in front of you, and so you need to continue on with your pace.
In essence, you're running from the start as if you were at about a mile to go. At a mile to go, if you were to come up on someone in a regular road race with the pack, that's 2 kilometers, you would settle in and then try to decide who was going to go first. My tendency was to always be the first to go, but some people liked to let someone else go first. But that strategy is just out the window in this kind of course. You just have to pretend you've gone by someone and you're in the last mile, and you have to keep up that effort, and you have to do it the whole way.
Looks like Jen Bergman had the fastest first mile split in 5:28 on the women's side. That puts her at a projected finish of around just about 34 minutes. So still very solid running for these types of conditions.
And even given the fact that the Japanese runners who finished 1-2 in the citizens race in the first race finished in around 35 minutes. And so even with the heat, she's running really, really well. She's running well.
You get a nice perspective there of the only slight elevation gain of 78 feet on this course. This is going to be the high point, right, where these athletes are cresting. For Colorado, this is a really fast course. Our estimation is it's somewhere in the vicinity at the elite level, about 30 seconds faster from the Boulder course. Same elevation, obviously. So it's to their advantage to really use that. And once they crest that little 78-foot rise, the rest is gradually flat or downhill back to the finish.
And Tim is right at about the 1.5 mile mark. I've run this course many times. On this course, the streets, because my daughter went to school here, undergrad and vet school, just about 10 seconds from now, he's going to go by a street called Broadview, where she lived for 7 years. So I know right where he is right now.
Well, a lot of these athletes, some of them are actually from Fort Collins and went to school here. And so, again, they're familiar with it. There is advantage to that, knowing the course and really, in this instance, where you're gauging your effort based on where you are on the course versus just racing the athletes around you.
And very often you will go out and run what we call intervals or fartlek, which is where you go hard for a while and then go easy and go hard for a while. And I'm willing to bet that many of the Fort Collins runners go out on this very course and practice at the different mile points. There they are. There's Broadview.
So, Frank, when you were racing, were you the type of athlete that would rather be out front, just knowing that you were not necessarily running scared, but in a sense controlling the race? Or did you like to be able to come from behind, gauge, pick people off, and have that added confidence that comes from passing people and gaining energy from that?
My mental set, which we've talked about this, it's a little different from yours, but everyone finds their own way. I love being out front because my goal was to get to the point in a race to know how far I was from the finish, say a mile, and have an idea of how far ahead I was. So I would look around, or I would see if I were going around a corner. And I could tell by doing the mental arithmetic that if I ran a certain effort and speed, because I knew how fast I was running, how much faster would the people behind me have to run to catch me? And that's how I had confidence in the last part of the race, which was just as we say in running, don't die. Don't die. Just hold your effort. And if I can just hold this effort, then every step to the finish line, my chances of winning get better and better. But he's approaching City Park. He'll get there in just a few minutes. And they skirt the eastern side of City Park and then head up to Mountain Avenue, which is where many of the runners are now.
So now through the 2-mile mark for almost everyone but Tim, we have what we're seeing as projected finish. Again, this is early in the race, but this is the algorithm that our tracking device is able to put together to say, okay, at this point in the race, if they keep up this average pace, here's how they will finish. So it's still showing that Jen Bergman would be our winner. So this is very early again. But now Laurie Takashi, who's one of our male athletes, he's bumped up into seconds. We're already showing how this interplay of the male and female pacing differs and how now the men are being intermixed with the females. So they're going to start catching some of these women now as they move to the 3-mile mark.
Right, but as we said before, some are better in the heat than others, and we find out who's having a good day.
That's a shot at Jackson Fries. He was one of he was actually our first male to start. So he's a local runner. His dad was a local runner back in the 80s, so he runs in the family, and he's a pharmacist, so he's a well-rounded young man.
And again, it shows you on form as we look at him. My view is he overstrides just a little. And everyone has a different kind of stride and a most efficient way of moving. But he gets every inch out of every stride he takes. And that's how he's efficient. Other runners, if you watch their turnover and you watch from the waist down, you will see others for their height, don't have quite as long a stride, but it works for him.
Well, and the information we're receiving from the course, Tim was still 25 seconds back from the gentleman that started in front of him, Frank Lara, which tells me that Tim may not be having a great day,
right,
or he's decided, for these conditions and based on where I am, I'm just going to run this at more of a workout effort. We'll see. We'll see if that changes as he moves along, but at this point, it looks like he might just be settling for an intense effort versus a race effort.
Yeah, but at a certain point, he's going to have to get some confidence and feel that he's gaining on the runners ahead. Because when you do that in a cross-country race or even in a road race, when you start to gain on someone, you can relax more. There's nothing more reinforcing than the idea that you're gaining on someone. And he's not getting that right now.
So they're coming up now on City Park, that 3-mile mark, and we'll get our preliminary splits at that point, and we'll get another assessment of how it's shaking out in terms of their predicted finish. Frank, from a psychological standpoint, where would you say you had to be in contact by a certain point in the race? Otherwise, it just was not going to come together. Is there a mile marker, or is there a standout landmark of once I see that stadium, I know I'm heading from home, or is it just different?
I'd say about 20 meters or 20 yards, a mile from the finish, you would have to think that you were okay, because at that level, when everyone's running, with this nearly the same ability, it would be hard to gain that, even that 4 or 5 seconds that you would have to get ahead of someone. So you have to be very close. And you bring up a very good point. In these kind of races, as you approach someone or you're pulling away from someone, there is an invisible thread between you. And once that is just a little bit too long, it snaps. And then the runner in front has the advantage. And the runner behind, generally, you start to tighten up and try to work a little too hard to keep that gap, or maybe to bridge that gap back. And he's up at City Park right now.
It sounds like from information we're receiving, Grant Fisher is now up with Lori Takahashi, who he started 57 seconds back. So Grant is moving up nicely. Ian Butler, who started even behind them, has moved up over a minute on the rest of the field. So these are the gentlemen that it seems like they're putting together a solid race. That's that turn on to Mountain Avenue. So now they're past the 3-mile mark. They'll be moving into what many of you just completed, which was that Titan mile from mile 3.3 to 4.3. Essentially the most beneficial and productive mile of the race, with the shade and with that slight downhill.
And the Titan Mile is one of the sponsors. Really goes from 3.3 to 4.3 because it's the flattest and straightest part of the course. And Titan Solutions, the local company that is underwriting this and sponsoring it, they offer innovative approaches to minimize waste. They're an outdoor company, to minimize waste, manage water, energy, and protect air quality. So it's good that they're out there.
So Jen Bergman is still our first female. She is now, we're looking for her 3-mile split. It looks like she came through in 5:37, average pace of 5:34. So she's holding right under that sub 5:40 mile pace, Jen is. Grant Fisher now, in terms of our predicted finish, he's jumped up into second place. So as shared, he's been putting in a big move through the middle of the course. So he's bumped up now to our second place. It looks like he has a predictive finish of about 30:15. So solid running for him.
Wow, they're really starting to bunch. This is great.
There you can see it. So now we're just past halfway through, and you can see that the staggered start is beginning to go away. So now is when it shifts from effort-based to race-based type of scenario. I think this is a good time, Frank, to thank all those volunteers that are out on the course. They've had a long day. They've been out there since bright and early, providing water and making sure that all you athletes were taken care of. So these types of races, there's so much that goes on. I mean, a year of planning to ensure that this comes together. And as part of that is these dedicated volunteers are willing to come out and cheer you on and help you out. And so we want to be sure to thank those folks for being out there.
I think the algorithm is just getting better and better, because I don't remember, and Ian Butler, he likes this course.
He does. He does. He won it in 2017. He's not afraid to put it out there, to say, I'm not working with any of y'all. I'm here to race all of y'all. He said, I'm sharpening my elbows. So we'll see if we get a shot here of Ian, but there's a great shot up Mountain Avenue. They are running east. They're coming up on that 4-mile mark. You can really start to see how the athletes are going to begin to be bunching together as this race continues to unfold.
And the other difference here between a road race when everyone starts at the same time is that you really have to go with whoever goes by you. You just have to. You have no choice. And so now we start to get visually a sense of who's having a good day and who isn't. But and the lens on the cameras in these kinds of shots, it shows you way, way back there. All these runners really aren't as close together as it appears, but it's getting denser and denser out there.
Unlike a lot of races, Frank, where once an athlete has moved past you and there's that kind of psychological piece where that string is broken and now they've pulled away from you and it's hard to keep attached to them. This is different because it's the opposite. You're really catching other people. So it's just a whole different dynamic. That looks like David Kiplagat as he's moved up quite well through the field.
And he's just moved by several people, men and women.
Dave is an Army reservist.
But I love this shot because you don't really know who's ahead.
That's That's right. That's right.
You don't. You just have to watch to see who starts to pass whom.
And again, so these athletes are awarded for their finish overall. They're also rewarded for how their time compares to their male or female counterparts. And they're also awarded for overall finish, male and female. So there's 3 different ways. And these, you know, the organizers of the FORTitude, they're very generous in terms of their support of these athletes, and over $23,000 in prize money that they offer these folks to ensure that they continue to support high-level running. And it's a part of their mission, and they do it at the Boulder, and they do it here at the FORTitude as well.
And to support the runners from the region. That is the point. You know, the Boulder started out many years ago being unabashed about saying, we support American runners, and we don't mind doing things in the race that in essence enable them to benefit perhaps a little bit more than runners from other countries. Well, I think they've taken this attitude towards the region. This race is for runners from this region of the country, and it allows them to perhaps get more notice and perhaps win a little bit more money than they would if they were in a national event.
Still seeing Jen Bergman as our projected winner. She's still out front in terms of if you factored in that staggered start. Grant Fisher, Ben Payne, Alejandro Garcia, Lori Takashi has dropped back just a bit, and Taylor Ward, that's kind of your top 6. Well, we'll see. We'll see over the course of these next mile and a half how that continues to work out. There's a shot of Ian Butler there in the all black. He's passing another runner, so that's always encouraging when you're out there pushing yourself.
And he's easy to spot. His toes point out a little bit more than most runners do. He runs a little more erect. It's almost like he's leaning back just a little bit. But again, that's his form. As we pointed out earlier, Tim Rackers tended to overstride, I thought, a little. But for him, it's not overstriding. Whereas Ian, you can see his turnover's a little faster and it's a little bit shorter stride. That's what works for him.
And Ian won the Boulder Citizens race in 30:55. So he's familiar with racing at altitude. He's won this race. So, you know, yesterday he seemed very confident. So we'll see how he continues to make up ground. But he seemed like he was here to race. Oh,
and it was funny because when we talked about, when he comes up on someone, will they work together? and his comment was, I'm not helping anybody.
Absolutely not.
But again, the heat has to be having an effect here. It really does. This is, I think, where the genetics start to set in. Some people can just take it in the heat a little bit better than others.
So Jen Bergman has made that right-hand turn off of Mountain Street. So now she's out of sight, so they can't see her.
They can't see if they're gaining. She is really having a day. Look at the lead that she has. Because this is still Mountain Avenue for the rest of the runners.
That's right. So Jen started about 1:25 back from the first female athletes, but she had, again, another 6-minute head start on the last male of Tim Rackers. So she was right in that kind of mid-pack from the women's seeding time frame. So this is the beauty of it. This is what's so great, is that anybody could win. And Jen, who maybe doesn't come in on paper with the fastest PR or with the fastest performances, with this staggered start, she has the opportunity now to enter that stadium first.
And if I've been watching closely, I haven't seen a male runner yet amongst this group of women. And here comes Legat, I think. He may make the turn south in first. But I think this is the first group of men making the turn. Oh, no, there's one.
Yeah, that looks like that might have been Ben Payne.
Okay. Yeah. But Jen is out there. She is really out there.
Because they're coming up the 5-mile mark, correct. So she's already passed the 5-mile mark, and she came through at 5:37 for that mile. For a bit more context, our lead males are running just under 5 minutes a mile. So about a 30 to 40 second discrepancy from the male pacing to the female pacing. And right then, it looked like Grant Fisher at the 5 mile mark had the fastest mile split of 4:58.
So it's going to be close. But you talk about running scared. Jen is out there running scared because you know they're coming, and you just have to keep up that effort.
So our top 3 women at the 5 mile mark: Jen Bergman, Becky Wade, and Adriana Nelson. Adriana's a standout athlete, Romanian-born. She's competed for Romania. She's a national champion for Romania and then became an American citizen, and she's been a national champion for the United States as well. There's your shot of your leader.
And she can see the finish now, I think.
So Jen Bergman, that is training for the Chicago Marathon, which is in about 6 weeks from now. So this is part of her training. One of the beauties of racing at altitude is you can really factor it into your training schedule. You recover quicker because it's not quite as fast as a sea level race. And there's our lead vehicle that we're seeing is just about at that 6 mile mark from our vantage point up high in the stadium. So we're gonna see our lead female, who could be our overall champion, coming into the stadium here just momentarily.
Yup, it looks like she's going to do it.
She's a 7-time NCAA division All-American. So she's an Olympic trials qualifier. She's no slouch. So she's familiar with running at a high level, that's for sure. So she has just passed 6 miles.
This is a runaway.
Well, let's give her a welcome when she comes through that tunnel, folks. She's run a great race, put in an amazing effort. We see all you hunkered in the shade out there, which she did not have much of. So let's give her a warm welcome.
There she is. A well-deserved win. She got to the head of the pack early and just carried it on through.
This is Jen Bergman, your 2019 FORTitude 10K Pro Race Chase Champion.
Great run in the heat. Absolutely fantastic run in the heat.
And it looks like this might be Alejandro Garcia, who's going to be our second individual entering the stadium. We'll verify that when we see his number for sure. Followed closely by Ben Payne.
So the men were close.
And here they all come. It's Alejandro Garcia, Ben Payne, Grant Fisher, David Kiplagat, Looks like that's Taylor Ward, possibly. Adriana Nelson.
And I like the fact that you see man, woman, man, man, woman. That again, the algorithm was pretty darn good. It, except for Jen, unbelievable.
There's always one that seems
There's
to
always one.
defy the principle.
It's hot out there. Way to run.
And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, as soon as this elite race is finished, we're going to have our Labor Day salute, honoring our first responders here in the Fort Collins community, as well as the skydivers will be taking the skies for your entertainment. The expo is open until 11:30. You can still register for next year's FORTitude 10K. Get that special hoodie that you can wear this fall. Hey, and you know, if you love this race, you'll love the Boulder Boulder. The Boulder Boulder is kind of the bookend of the summer season. So you can start it off with the Memorial Day tradition and then end it off with your Labor Day tradition a year from now. Here's Tim Rackers coming in right now, who started last, has made up quite a bit of ground on the field. Congratulations to Tim. Well, Frank, we had another amazing race. It looked like the athletes enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. What are some of your final thoughts as you reflect on this year's race?
Well, I talked about the natural selection that really is at work here. The heat really does make a difference. And again, I think Jen Bergman obviously runs very, very well in the heat because the algorithm's pretty accurate, and she just ran out ahead of it. And if you look at her overall best times, you know, for 5,000 meters, it's about 16 minutes. For 10,000, it's 33 minutes, and those are probably sea level times. You know, she just ran better at altitude in the heat than anyone else.
Well, it was great to see them out there working hard and showcasing their talent, showcasing all their hard work. I know a lot of these athletes have other things they're getting ready for, and we appreciate them factoring in the FORTitude into their training plans. It's been great to watch them. You know, I imagine next year we can't have 2 years in a row where it's 85 degrees on Labor Day, but you never know. But we want to thank all of you for coming. We want to thank you for sticking around, and please stay with us for the Labor Day salute. We're going to throw it down back to Doc on the field to take us through the next phase of our entertainment this morning.